and that's the Auckland Plan 2050 update. And we'll hear from Vanessa Blacklock and Denise O'Shannessy. Members, just to let you know that we actually can't reconvene this meeting at another time. There is no time in the diary. If we don't complete the business of the Planning Committee, it'll have to go to the governing body, and the governing body agenda is probably looking equally as busy. So if we can just keep an eye on the quorum and hopefully progress to complete our agenda.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
What would you like to move?
The item, just when it's ready.
Well, we don't move the item, we move the recommendations.
Oh, the recommendations then.
Okay, let's have the presentation from Vanessa, I think is... Denise is going to lead, and then Vanessa. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. This is the first of what will become a regular 6-monthly update on the Auckland Plan. The report contains information on work we've been doing to ensure the plan is effective. It notes what has changed since adoption of the plan in June. There's an update on the monitoring framework, which has progressed significantly since the plan was adopted. And we outline a range of work to embed the Auckland Plan into the business in a way that will help align 10-year budget programs to the plan's outcomes and provide greater visibility of how we're performing. So Vanessa will take you through those parts of the report in a little bit more detail.
So for the 6-monthly update, and in terms of what's new, we know that the Auckland Plan is providing strong strategic direction for some of the outcomes for Auckland, and 2 recent examples have been council submissions to central government that have been mentioned earlier today on the Residential Tenancies Act and also on healthy home standards. In the case of Residential Tenancies Act, the proposals from the government are consistent with Homes and Places Focus Area 2. Changes recognise the reality of renting for Aucklanders and the need for security of tenure to broaden the range of tenure models. In the case of healthy home standards, those similarly are in line with another Homes and Places Focus Area 3. The proposal recognises the need to improve the quality of existing rental homes. In other areas where things that are changing, in terms of the government's urban growth agenda, which have also been mentioned today, we're actively involved in bringing an Auckland Plan perspective to that, and as they progress, we will be continuing to monitor them and continuing advocacy, and where there are impacts on the plan's evidence base or implementation potential, for example on Homes and Places or in the development strategy, we'll be assessing that and bringing those back to you for discussion. One benefit of the digital Auckland Plan is that it can be kept up to date when data and information that has informed the plan changes. Because it is a 30-year strategic plan, we wouldn't anticipate that recent changes in data would drive a change to the strategic intent, but nonetheless some things do need to be changed now. The first area is as a result of the release of the 2018 Quality of Life survey results, and you'll note in the plan that we use that in infographics and some of the narrative. They will be updated, and with the release of the 2017-2018 new residential consents data, that is also represented in the plan and will need to be updated. So that brings us to the second area of the report, which is the monitoring framework for the plan. You have attached to your report, attachment A is the baseline measures report, and that outlines the status of each of the 33 measures in the plan across the 6 outcomes of the plan and the development strategy. 16 of those measures have final baseline data sets. 10 will have final data sets available in 2019. That's mainly due to the census data being released next year and for year-end calendar data being available. 6 of those measures require further development due to pending and ongoing work, for example, the Unitary Plan Monitoring Framework, and those that are being developed now. One of the measures needs to be changed, and as you'll see on that slide, that is one of the Māori identity and wellbeing outcome measures, which currently reads benefits of whānau Māori measured through tamariki and rangatahi, and the proposal is to change that to whānau wellbeing. The reason for this, it's been very difficult to identify data for rangatahi and tamariki, as the data sets don't currently exist. And we've revisited this measure with input from the IMSB Secretariat, and we know that some of the data under whānau wellbeing will be available next year from Te Kupinga when it comes out, which is a Stats New Zealand data series. So we're still landing that data set, and we'll continue to work with the IMSB Secretariat to do that. This slide is just designed to give you a look and feel as to how our annual scorecard will look when it appears on the Auckland Plan digital site, and that's on the left-hand side that shows what an annual scorecard might look like for the belonging and participation outcome, and the right-hand side gives an indication of what how it might look when we were able to spatialise some of that data and show specific data sets by local board. Still on the monitoring framework, what you can expect to see coming before you in upcoming planning committee meetings is the annual scorecard, and that will come before you in July 2019. It'll give you a snapshot of the progress against the outcomes of the plan against those measures, and a short commentary on observed trends. That will be followed closely by Council's annual report in 2019, which will focus on Council's contribution to those outcomes. And then we will have a more in-depth analysis report, which will provide analysis against those measures, plus some wider data sets. There'll be a breakdown of local board identified measures, and where possible, we will map those results spatially. You can expect to see this in early 2020, and the idea is that that provides an evidence base for your decision making on the next long-term plan. Some of the detail that we'll be able to provide will be some of the things that had been discussed in the workshops on the refresh for the plan, and for example in the health area, the baseline that you have before you in the report talks about self-rated health perceptions from the Quality of Life Survey, and we'd expect that in the in-depth analysis report every 3 years we'd be drawing on DHB measures such as how comfortable people are after vigorous exercise of 30 minutes, or some of the life expectancy figures from the census. Moving to the third part of the report, this is about the work that's going on to build the foundation for the next long-term plan, and as part of that we need to ensure the funding is going to the right things. The current LTP budget sets the biggest CAPEX program, as you know, for Council to deliver in any 10-year period, and the long-term plan and the Auckland Plan were developed concurrently, and we see strong alignment between the two plans through a common set of 3 key challenges and the outcomes, through which there's been some alignment of groups of activities, levels of service and performance measures, and also in the timing and sequencing for growth through the development strategy and the infrastructure strategy. Building on the current budget, we'll focus on operationalising the Auckland Plan to make sure all of our service and asset management plans are progressively aligned over the next 2 years in preparation for that next LTP. And this includes, just taking you down the left-hand side of that slide, aligning timing and sequencing of investments with the development strategy, aligning the planning and delivery of place-based plans with the development strategy, ensuring that the strategies provide enough operational detail to implement the high-level direction of the Auckland Plan, and monitoring effectiveness of regulatory plans and delivering on the Auckland Plan, in particular around impacts of growth and development. In addition, we're going to be working with central government more generally to see how their work aligns with the Auckland Plan. So in addition to making sure that the funding is going to the right things, we need to make sure that we're making a difference in the right areas. And with those funding programs already in place, we need to make sure that they're delivering those intended outcomes, and I'm just going to run through how we're going to make sure they make a difference for Auckland and Aucklanders. So we can do that by having the Auckland Plan tell a story across Auckland, given that it's the plan for all of Auckland, whereas the annual report tells us what Auckland Council's contributions to that are. And we will do this by, in the organisation, aligning the reporting for Council and the whole of Auckland. So, as I mentioned previously, you'll see the Auckland Plan annual dashboard giving the annual overview on how we're tracking on the outcomes, followed by the annual report focusing on Council's contributions through services and programs delivered in that year. So it's our intent that the side-by-side reporting will help tell a more integrated story to the public and is a good evidence base for the next planning cycle.
Excellent, Vanessa, thank you. Just before we take questions, members, can I just have a hands up those that can stay to the end of the business? We do need to complete this business. Member Namani. Okay, I'm going to do a count. 1, 2, I've got 3 so far. Councillor, thank you for coming back. Councillor Collins. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I need one more.
Is yourself?
11. Okay, so could we just be mindful? And the Mayor signalled to me at the yesterday that he needed to leave early for another engagement. Councillor Simpson the same. So, okay, we're just on quorum once those members leave and Councillor Clow. Okay, thank you.
I can only stay till 9, Chair.
Thank you. Is that today?
Yeah.
Not a
or
competition.
tomorrow morning.
It's not a competition, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa, and Denise and team. Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashwell, please. Question.
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay, Councillor Casey.
I've got a couple of questions. Can I ask specific questions about the targets and one about the process of setting the targets? In the report it says you've kind of stopped work because the government's, it's a difficult process. Can you just expand on that a bit more? The 2 targets I want to discuss are the one that's not there on homelessness and the one that is there on safety, but I'll ask a separate question about that. So just the process first.
So through the chair, so we have done carried out some engagement with central government officials on the targets. It's not been directed to them that it's the targets work is in their program of work. So we have been doing some initial thinking and work on that. With the work that's going on at the moment around agreeing or working together on shared development priorities and working together on what council and government can do together, it's possible that the targets work might be included in that. But at this stage, we can't make any more progress on those
That was
targets.
always going to be an issue, Mr. Chairman, and one which I raised where we have targets and the government doesn't. The government's hardly likely to be welcoming of our targets. So that is an issue. And how do we resolve that? Do we put our targets in if the government's ducking for cover, say on homelessness?
So we've still got work to do in terms of identifying those targets, so we haven't reached a point of sitting waiting for that negotiation or discussion to happen. So at this stage we can continue to work on those to develop what we think are the best targets to be ready for that conversation.
All right, that explains the homelessness one. The one I really have got a question. I read through this is good stuff. I'm looking at our page 135. Just having signed off this morning our wonderful Into the Future study for the city centre, there's a question here about safety in the city centre, and it did come up this morning, but the question's bothering me a wee bit because it asks about safety in your city centre. Does that mean Manukau, Waitakere, North Shore and Auckland, or does it just mean the Auckland city centre? Because I was reading it first of all quite badly, because it looks like 64% don't feel safe in the city centre at night. That's what the statistics say. But if you look at the question, it says here, 50% of Auckland residents felt safe in their city centre. So if I asked Alf that question, he'd think I was asking about Manukau.
Do you know that? I can answer it.
Yeah.
It's through the quality of life survey, which can be broken down to local boards. So it won't be specific in saying how they identify with their city centre, but when they ask the respondent, do you feel safe in your city centre, it's how they define it. So we can break that down in the future by saying those people.
So that doesn't mean the city centre.
Not asked, just not the CBD.
Right.
No.
That's fine. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker, please.
Sure, just a few things, and they just go to some of the measurements. So I'm assuming urban forest cover is going to include mature trees on private land because we see a significant loss there. Great to see that there's going to be a measure around built heritage and character. Just under air quality, I'm making the assumption that, correct me if I'm wrong, that will need to be somewhat geographic because quite obviously around the city centre we know that we've got a significant issue around air quality which may not exist elsewhere. And just a question around you know, well-being and the like, and quite obviously it may be a little bit outside our scope, but we've got things like youth suicide statistics that are incredibly bad in Auckland, globally. Do those sorts of things give an indicator around well-being and so on? And I know that obviously we've got government agencies and so on working in that area, but council does have a part to play.
So there are a number of projects going on across the country at the moment, across the sector, around defining wellbeing and what wellbeing means. So we can draw some insight from those in terms of the best way to measure wellbeing. I think we can look at whether that's a good measure when we do the 3-yearly report, when we look and draw on a wider range of data to help us understand how we're progressing against the outcomes, so that we can consider that when we work through that process.
Cool. And my reason for raising that is I'm on Councillor Casey's committee, and long may that committee continue. And the councillors that go to it often have access to really good data around what's happening in the real world, and some of it is really quite alarming in terms of issues, youth suicide issues and other issues around Auckland. Thank you.
Okay, any other lines of inquiry, members? Councillor Hills?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question I brought up in the pre-agenda meeting, but around how we can sort of tweak the transport and access measure. I worry that the focus is too much on transport and access by car to employment and not enough on public transport, and I think that is, I believe it's slightly at odds to ATAP and the Auckland Plan itself. I know that you kind of see it differently the way I do, but the way it's represented is, to me, seems like the aim is to make sure we've got a quicker trip by car to employment when everything we're trying to do is probably more towards public transport. Not saying that we should make it longer for the cars, but just how do we invest in more public transport infrastructure?
Yeah, I think, again, you look at these measures, if you look at them in isolation, they don't tell a very rich story, and also some of the unpicking we're going to do. So we've included, obviously we've attempted to include the public transport bit under Measure 2, which sort of looks at the vehicle hours, the delay, and also under the previous one, Measure 3, which provides that breakdown in terms of public transport versus active transport. Yep. And then we've also looked at it in terms of the access via public transport under Measure 1 within the modelling side of it. And I think a lot of this was going to be supported quite strongly through the Auckland Transport, their monitoring framework themselves, because they measure, as you know, a lot of things. So it's going to be, the richness of that story is going to be when we start to analyse this trend and break it down further. So there's also a further measure there in terms of your transport costs. So I think there's sufficient in there, but I mean we're obviously open to expanding that if it doesn't meet the needs.
I was just thinking even the discussion before around CRL and how it may halve the time that people have access to a job because of that investment, whereas it still feels like we're kind of aiming to shorten those car trips when that may not ever be possible.
Yeah, I think when we do the first report and show the trends and does it provide you the information that you need, and I think also the ability to then map these things spatially across a broader set of outcomes, it starts to give probably a richer story.
Good. Thank you.
Can I just add too, I mean, some of it could be a presentational issue, so we can look at that more carefully to make sure it's more clearly communicated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hills, would you like to move?
Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councillor Filipaina, thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried.
Thank you.
Moving now